I think I should volunteer to go first from now on, so that I don't have all the good statements taken. Poverty is a relative thing, and a lot of it has to do with your perception of what is poverty and what isn't poverty. I grew up on a farm, a poor family. We had too many kids for the number of beds that we had in the house, so somebody had to sleep on the couch every night, because we didn't have enough rooms or enough beds, and that was just, we learned to live with it. We had no running water, and so when I was a youngster, from the time I was about 3.5 until I was probably 5.5, we used to buy peanut butter in gallon containers, little pails of peanut butter, and so I would go down to the well, and I would pump my little peanut butter pail full of water, and I would carry it up to the house and dump it into the big drinking pail that we had there, where we had the dipper that everybody drank out of the same dipper, and that was just kind of life. And we were probably a little bit more poor than our neighbors were, but not more poor than all the neighbors were. There were certainly others who had that kind of experience. When we were sent our lunches at school, we never had Ziploc bags and things like that. My mother would always take out the waxed paper from the cereal boxes, and there was nothing that ever got thrown away. And of course, with soap, you would never think of throwing away that last little bit of the bar of soap. You always welded it to the next bar of soap, so that there was no waste whatsoever. So when I turned about 5.5 years old, we got water to the kitchen sink, running water to the kitchen sink. And so that was just like hog heaven. I mean, this was wonderful, to actually not have to carry all the water in a bucket at a time in order to take baths together once a week, whether we needed it or not. And then when I was about 10.5 or 11 years old, we actually got an indoor bathtub and an indoor toilet. We didn't have to go wandering out in freezing cold weather to the old outhouse. So anyway, that's the way I grew up. But we had a fairly comfortable life in many respects, and the expectations weren't very high. There weren't many people who came to our house and looked at us and said, "Oh, these poor, poverty-stricken people," because that was the community that we lived in. So it's a relative thing. The people who live on $2 a day around the world, many of them, they kind of are in a pattern where they live that way. And while $2 sounds like nothing, their expectations are extremely low as well. And so they may not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to diminish poverty here. I'm just kind of talking about the challenges that we have. Suppose we have a 2-income family who have 2 cars and a nice house, 2,500 square feet or whatever it might be, and they're coasting along very nicely, and suddenly the bottom falls out of the economy, and both wage earners lose their job. Now they've got this house and they've got these cars that they owe money on, and maybe the car now is at a point where to get rid of the car and turn it into cash actually doesn't work, because they owe as much as the car is worth. And to deal with the house. So these people have a different type of poverty, and it may be a more transient. If everything works well and they both get jobs again, they can continue on. But here are people who have lived an affluent lifestyle, and suddenly now they're caught up to where how do you cope with it? What do you do? And of course, then there's another type of poverty, and this is of a different nature altogether, and that's psychological poverty, and that is that we watch television every day, and the advertisers on television are bound and determined to make you feel dissatisfied with what you have. And so, if you don't use this particular toothpaste, you have bad breath. If you don't use this particular kind of shaving cream, you're going to have whatever it might be. If you don't drive this particular kind of car, then you're inadequate and you're not keeping up with everybody else, and there's something wrong with you. So that's purely a mental thing. Rabbi Kay mentioned that things are kind of stacked against people who are poor. I remember when I was working in high school, we worked on I worked in residential building, And so we did a house that was a little nicer than some, and the cabinets that we put in were pre-scratched, pre-stressed. And so we get to talking about this on the job, and so one of the workmen said, so here's how this works. You go into the lumberyard and look at the cabinets, and you see these scratched cabinets. And so the lumberyard manager says, are you going to be proud of those scratches? Are you going to think this is a great idea? If so, they cost 50% more than the regular price. But if you're going to be ashamed of them, then we'll give them to you for 50% less than the regular price because they're damaged. And it was just kind of interesting to me that, we had worm-eaten paneling. And, extra money paid so that we could have paneling that was worm-eaten. Well, what happens with the poor person who needs money? They say, you need money? You really need money? Then we don't want to give you money. You don't need money? Oh, then we've got lots of money to give you. So it makes it very, very difficult. For example, I look at the ads for Publix every week, and I look at what's buy one, get one free. And I buy way ahead on the things that I need because I've got enough economic, financial liquidity that I can do that. But the poor person who is really within pennies, as it were, on a weekly budget can't take advantage of that kind of thing. And so it makes it extremely complicated for them to get out of that kind of situation. And not only that, but very often the poor person isn't taught how not to be poor. There is a poor mentality. So the Native Americans, they taught their children to hunt and to fish, and they did a wonderful job of it, but they didn't teach them about compounding interest because they didn't understand compounding interest. What they did know, they taught well, and they passed on great blessing to the kids. And so what will happen in generational poverty is that what lessons the parents have learned, they will pass on to the kids. And they'll say, when you go down to the welfare office, if you do X instead of Y, it will work out better for you. They're really very, very smart. Okay, they pass on what they know, but they don't know how to invest in an IRA. And they don't know how to buy in the way that's going to be most productive, et cetera. And so it makes it extremely difficult to move out of poverty. And then, of course, it also makes it difficult when we give people handouts, and again, I'm not hard-hearted here, but what we need to give them more than just the handout, that is a bridge to get them out of a current situation, short-term, but we need to give them the education that they need to understand how to budget, how to take care of a checking account, how to prepare for retirement, how to ensure that everything is appropriately insured and then they're not taking risks and all that. And it's just too hard for us to do. It takes so much time to educate people because it is so totally foreign if they're in a situation of generational poverty. And so poverty is a huge challenge that we have because it comes in so many shapes and sizes, and it involves so much energy and so much investment in order to turn the situation around. And of course, that which is complicated and that which is challenging is not something we should run from, but it's something that we should embrace, and it's something that we should accept as the challenge that it is and try to make the world a better place. Thank you.